I want to start with a few words about myself. So, as we just heard, I'm working as an investigative journalist with Norddeutscher Rundfunk, which is a public news broadcaster in Germany. And I focused on data-driven investigations. So usually there are some leaks or some USB sticks in our resort. They go onto my desk, and when I tell this to people, they usually think I do something like we see on the picture here. So I press my finger on some buttons and things work out, but that's not the truth. So I actually read a lot of stuff and work on Excel sheets. And well, while doing so, I was lucky enough to sit on the right spot when a few spectacular projects came along. And so I had the chance to work on some of the bigger leaks in regard to tax avoidance in the past. It started with the so-called offshore leaks, which the team I joined in the end of the project. And then we had projects like the Swiss leaks and the Luxembourg leaks, of course. And this year, or the last year, I spent a lot of time on the Panama papers as well. I'm not telling you this because I like to talk about myself, but because I think that my career, to a certain extent, is an example for a new type of investigative journalist that is also needed to work on such stories. I will try to make this a bit more clear in the next minutes. But I will try I will begin with something I realized over the time, and it's a pessimistic realization. Tax havens and offshore finance are horrible, horrible topics for journalists to choose. And if I was asked by a young journalist, I would probably tell him or her that it's not so much fun to work in, and that maybe you should choose something else. And in my experience, this has three main reasons, and I want to talk about them today. So the first reason is access. The main idea behind the letterbox company in an offshore tax haven is to keep the information out of the public. The idea is to keep it unknown who's the owner and what is the asset of this entity or this company. And we are talking about an industry in which very rich people and usually very clever companies pay some of the best lawyers and tax advisors to prevent our reporting from happening and to prevent our releases. And I don't want to overestimate the role of a journalist in this. It's of course a lot of other branches that cannot peek behind this curtain, as tax authorities as well, family members, business partners. And these are just a few we found in the researches I was part of. So, how do we tackle the access problem? I stole this cartoon from a website, from the internet, so sorry for that. But I think it sums it up quite well. This is probably a hard realization for me and also for some fellow reporters, but there's really not so much we personally can do. The real heroes are the whistleblowers and the sources that leak data and information to the press. And we are very lucky that there are courageous people like Raphael Halle, who will speak after me, and Antoine Deltour, for example, who together made the Luxembourg leaks possible, or the unknown John Doe, who's behind the Panama Papers revelation. And we as reporters, we rely on them, and we should thank whistleblowers and sources every day and support their rights as good as we can. Because usually a protected whistleblower means also press protection at the same time. We should also be ready for the day one of them turns to us, and I cannot stress this enough. One of the reasons Edward Snowden, for example, who's of course another very important whistleblower of our time, went to Laura Poitras with his files was that he trusted her. He trusted her with safe communication and secure handling of the files. So having a PGP key available and knowing the basics of encrypted communication and safe data handling is in my eyes a minimum requirement for someone who wants to work as a reporter in this field nowadays. By the way, is it my water? Can I drink from this? Okay. Sorry. Even though I work for a TV station, I'm not used to stand in front of a lot of people. I usually sit on the desk like this. Also being patient helps a lot, I guess. So this is not an automatism, but it's something we learned from the past. One leak is followed by another leak, and probably followed by another leak. And the people see what we do. They see what other whistleblowers do, and they also see what we as a reporters do. And this encourages, in my opinion, to blow the whistles themselves, to leak interesting information they have access to. And this is a very good thing for transparency in general, and sometimes a very good thing for a reporter. If the source comes to you, sometimes it's not. And this is why it also helps as a reporter to be visible. This is also one of the reasons why I stand here today, so if anyone wants to leak something, you can talk to me after the presentation. Good. So we have access to data. And there's a second reason why this is not an easy field to work in my opinion. This stuff is really complex. What we see here is the financing scheme of E.ON. It's a big energy company from Germany. And this is taken from the Lux Leaks data. And this is schemes like this or structures like this, we literally found hundreds of them in the files. By the way, I'm not sure if you can read this, but it says a loan of 14 billion Great British pounds here. So this is really big money being moved there. And, of course, as a reporter, you want to know what's going on here. As the leaks are growing, the stories are even more hidden. So when we started working with the Panama Papers data, one of our veteran investigative journalists from the team, he came to us and he said that he wishes back for the time when someone would just come to you with an interesting story and he would simply hand you over the 5 important pages. But I mean, it's not news for anyone here that the way we communicate in general has changed in the past, and so has the newsroom reality, especially in the investigative field. So we need to get used to complex and big leaks and stories. The Panama Papers consisted in the end of 11.5 million individual files and a total of more than 2.5 terabytes of data. And this is probably enough to keep a lone wolf investigative reporter busy for a whole lifetime, and he might still miss leads and not find stories in there. It's also the kind of scoop that an investigative reporter dreams of, and we all dream of, that the one we want to keep for ourselves. That's a very common instinct with reporters. It's our league, our scoop, we want to keep it, we want it to make us a superstar. Fortunately for us, we have colleagues like Bastian Obermeier and Friedrich Obermeier from Süddeutsche Zeitung, the guys who talked to the source of the Panama Papers, and in their office the revelation basically started. And they overcame this instinct and shared their scoop with hundreds of other journalists, and I was lucky to be one of them. And they drove us all to share the results and post questions and follow leads together and work on stories together. And then all of a sudden there were hundreds of reporters everywhere in the world working on similar stories, talking to each other about it. And the Panama Papers research was led by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, the ICIJ. And they speak of something they call radical sharing. So it's basically the same concept a multinational company uses, like we see here. You create a complex network, but you don't do it in a tax haven. You do it in newsrooms all over the world. And if E.ON can make use of someone who's sitting on the Isle of Man, on some tax law on the Isle of Man, for example, or in Luxembourg, or wherever they want, we can do the same. We can make use of colleagues in Switzerland and in South America, North America, in Russia, wherever we want. This is basically the same idea. For the Panama Papers, by the way, that was the only way I can personally imagine to unlock the journalistic potential of something like this. But it's not only the fellow reporters that we need to ask to help. We also need real experts, tax lawyers, investigators, former investigators, people who've seen this stuff from the inside, people who have been in banks and worked with this and know how to process documents like this. We sometimes found them very hard to find, but usually very helpful in the end. So when we, but even though they come to situations where they can't really help anymore. So we, for example, took this chart to 2 different well-known and established tax lawyers in Germany, and we got 2 totally different opinions on it. So it helps to have experts, but it's not the golden rule, I think. In other leaks I worked, like the Panama Papers or the Swiss leaks, the situation was a bit different because the structures were not as complex as this. But still, we had to put a lot of work into it, and sometimes it was hard to merely understand what we had on the desk. So I personally spent a lot of time reading background information and trying to understand general business procedures at the beginning of the leak. And it feels like you make no progress on the actual story at all because you're reading all this background stuff. It's a bit like going back to university, but without parties, unfortunately. All right, so we have access, and at some point we probably have understood what we have in front of us and what our team is working on. Here comes the third problem. Talking about tax evasion and offshore finance industry is not a sexy topic. It's very hard to understand in most cases. It's not black, not white, mostly on the gray scale somewhere if you report a story. I chose this example here. So when Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie file a divorce, everybody wants to know what's going on, yeah? The framing is very easy. It's a super couple, they break up, there's probably a reason for that, I want to know the reason. Yeah? And this is the story we compete against. So when we try to make our audience aware of the fact that there are some tax deals going on in Luxembourg or in Malta, or that there's a structure somewhere on the Isle of Man that should not be like it does in reality, this is what we have to fight against. And there's a bit more stuff going on, like Netflix and Facebook. I'm not going to talk about this. This is a general media problem. This is like a close enemy. So what I suggest is to break down the complex structures. If I want to talk about the financing scheme of E.ON, the big thing we saw before, maybe it's a good idea to describe only what is going on in the bottom left corner of this thing, of the whole structure, and use this as a way to give the audience a general idea of how such deals work. It's a very painful process sometimes because you have to leave out facts of your reporting that maybe took weeks to understand yourself and to research. But it is very necessary. And in my opinion, a good breakdown and a focus on the right aspects might even be the most important part in reporting a complex story. And the third thing we should do is try to find a new angle and bring the story close to the audience. When I was in journalism school, our teachers would always say us, dog bites man, it's not a story. But man bites dog is a very good story, it's front page news. The problem is rich people hiding money overseas in offshore tax havens is basically dog bites man. So we need to find the aspects and the scope of a story that matters to the audience. That works great in my opinion if you have big names, of course. I mean, I believe most of you have heard of the football leaks recently. That's a good story. It's full of great names. Everybody wants to know what's going on in Cristiano Ronaldo's bank account, probably. But in my experience, it also works if you show the results of the tax dodging and the financial crimes and bring it close to the people and connect it to their reality or the reality of someone else they can rely on. For the Panama Papers, for example, my colleagues went to visit a hospital in Guinea that had to send people away because they were lacking funding, so they had no money. At the same time, a businessman used an offshore company to keep millions of dollars from a mining deal he got out of the country. It's very easy to see the unfairness here. You have a hospital without money on the one side, and you have money flowing outside of the country that should be reinvested somewhere in here, on the other hand. And we tried to use the same approach when we reported about a public pension fund in the Luxembourg Leaks that made a dodgy tax deal, which costed in the end a poor area of Berlin city roughly 5 million euros of real estate transfer tax. So what we did was we sent our reporter to a school in the area where the property was bought, and we showed where the money was missing. And you did not need to know any details about the structure and the Luxembourg dealings. It was very easy to get the feeling that something was wrong here. Yeah, and finally, if it comes to marketing, it's not only the big stories and the international leaks that make a difference, I guess. I think it's very important to keep the debate going all the time. So to report small cases, small corruptions, to report small decisions, political decisions in the field of tax avoidance. Only if we as reporters succeed to set the topics on the agenda and to steadily keep the audience informed, we can generate an interest in the more complex stories. A lot of airtime was spent in the Panama Papers reporting to explain the general system of offshore companies. So how does it work? What role does the bank play? What role do the intermediaries play? Most viewers will know that in the future, and that's a very good thing because we can start a bit further down the actual story and we have more room. Yeah, so what do we make of all that? I was asked to show you how a journalist can explain what is going on in the tax haven, and here I list 3 reasons we actually can't really do that in most cases. So if we don't have big leaks and we don't have all the advantages I just talked about, we can't really do that. It's a hard field to report on. You cannot get the access to the information, as I said. You cannot usually understand easily what's going on. And in the end, nobody wants to read it or see it. No, really. I mean, I was working on the Panama Papers for a year straight, I guess, and I often thought would be much better off if I had chosen to report on Hollywood couples or sports or the weather or something, because it's just way easier. So then again, of course, we have some solutions for this. I tried to give some answers that worked for me over the past years, and we can, of course, always talk about details later. My email is also in this presentation if someone wants to know something specific. But my suggestion is to support the whistleblower protections and to be close to your sources, to have your tools ready when someone wants to talk to you, be patient and visible, find other journalists and share work with them, talk to experts, read background information, and when it comes to reporting, make it easy, close to the audience, and keep the debate alive. And then in the end, sometimes things happen that make you still love your job. This is why all this stuff really matters. It's a picture from Reykjavik. Johannes probably knows what's going on there.
Oh, yeah.
After the Panama Papers made the headlines, we had angry citizens all over the world, not only here, and they were gathering and protesting because they felt betrayed. And this is one of the results of our cooperative reporting. And it's still until this day, it sends a shiver down my spine when I see pictures like this. There are dozens of other examples as well. We heard about some of them last night as well. But it's not only the Panama Papers. There are great stories, and we heard of in this conference as well. Even more important than demonstrations, I think, are the political reactions. So leak after leak, there's put more pressure on the leaders to tackle financial secrecy, to tackle the unfair system of the offshore industry. Even the Luxembourg leaks that were basically stopped, the discussion was stopped on a political level by Mr. Juncker. Even these revelations led to small political changes, and the Panama Papers will probably do so even more. Yeah, I like to see bad guys and politicians move, and I also like Excel spreadsheets, so I hope there's more stuff like this coming. If you want to know anything, contact me.